So what we're going to try to do today is just to have about 45 minutes of discussion on the state budget. As I said earlier, we can't do everything. And so the idea was that we invite some of our closest friends to help us talk through some of the key points and make sure that we at least have a basic understanding to talk to our neighbors and our friends and our family about how we should go in a different direction. I just want to introduce all the panelists quickly, and then I'm going to ask each of them to go kind of one at a time talking about some core areas in the budget. First to my left is someone who's been a frequent visitor here, someone who a lot of you know as one of not only Wisconsin's greatest champions, but the country's greatest champions for universal health care and access to quality health care for every American, and that's the Executive Director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin, Robert Kraig. To his left is someone who's a tremendous champion here in the city of Milwaukee. She's a parent of Milwaukee Public School children, and she's a social worker in the Milwaukee Public Schools. And she's here representing I Love My Public School, which is a new organization primarily of parents who are out there advocating for public education access, Jennifer Mandel. To her left is one of our great progressive champions who's known as an advocate for families, for seniors, for mental health care, for ensuring that we have a strong economy, and she's going to be talking about some environmental issues, some issues around the economy, and her experience as a state legislator fighting the budget repair bill and the budget. And that's your friend and mine, Representative Sandy Pasch. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Robert to talk a little bit about the health care provisions in the budget and the family provisions in the budget and what is bad about it and how we can keep going. We're going to do 5 to 7 minutes per each speaker, and then we'll have a good amount of time for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Sechin. Thanks for putting this together. Given that we could have budget votes very quickly because I think they'd like to beat the recalls, so to speak. So I'm going to talk about the Medicaid part of the budget. And Medicaid is one of the great pillars of the 20th century, part of the Great Society, where we created Medicare for seniors, which, as you pointed out, Paul Ryan doesn't think should exist anymore moving forward. Medicaid is a state-federal partnership program. So, unlike Medicare, which is entirely federal, it involves the state. In Wisconsin, 60% of the money is federal, 40% is for the state. It's paid for by the state. So the more money you spend as a state, the more federal money you get. And it funds a wide variety of programs, but the largest things it pays for health care coverage for low-income families and individuals, known as Badger Care here in Wisconsin. 750,000 people on Badger Care, which we think is a great accomplishment. Actually, the expansion was something the Doyle administration did off of what Tommy Thompson began. The other side, since he has a problem that so many people are on health care coverage and have that for their families. And it also covers long-term care for seniors and for people with disabilities. And so that is the whole continuum, from just help staying independent in the community all the way up to people who need nursing home care. And the family care program, which is extremely popular, is part of that. And so these are crucial things for, quite frankly, if you do not have a long-term care support, then you do not have freedom, basically, because you're not free to live an independent, fulfilling life if you're a person with a disability or if you're a senior. And as far as health care, it's a life and death issue if you can't get Badger Care. And by the way, you are on your own with the insurance companies. If you don't have the money to buy insurance, they're not going to sell it to you. If you have pre-existing conditions, they're definitely going to discriminate against you, and that's why you need Badger Care. And so it's a little bit of a tricky question as to what the Walker budget does. Let me say one other thing about Paul Ryan, since Rob is here. If his plan had been in effect for 10 years, we would have gotten $3 billion less in the last budget for Medicaid. Just to give you an example of what effect it would have on Medicaid moving forward. Ultimately, it block grants it and will cut it by 49% in the first 10 years. So it would gut Badger Care, and it would gut long-term care for people with disabilities and seniors. Now, here's the problem with understanding what happens in Walker's budget. There's a $500 million cut in Medicaid. We don't know exactly where it's going to be. The reason for that is that the budget repair bill, the same one that attacked collective bargaining rights or workers' rights, also created unprecedented powers for the Department of Health Services Secretary, Dennis Smith, who came here from Washington, from the Heritage Foundation, to run Medicaid for Scott Walker. And he, by the way, is one of the top right-wing intellectuals on healthcare policy in the country. So he came here to make us as much of a model for how to cut Medicaid as Walker has been a model for how to go after unions and union bust. And so what it did is it gave him the power to change laws and statutes with no legislative oversight. And so the budget doesn't specify the cuts, the full 2-year budget, because it's given to Dennis Smith and Scott Walker to decide. In fact, they wouldn't even have to publish what the changes were. We'd have to find them. They could simply create new regulations. They'd be in effect. We wouldn't know until we found them. Now, one thing that is clear is there's $100 million in cuts for family care, and that means waiting lists right away. They've already started waiting lists for seniors, which didn't exist before on family care, which provides the full continuum of long-term care from basic just supports to stay in the community all the way up to nursing home care. And there may be more, and the waiting list for people with disabilities will increase. So here are the two scenarios as far as the $500 million, just so you know. There are federal rules as to how many changes you can make in Medicaid, because it is a federal and state partnership. And in fact, the National Health Care Reform Law, the Affordable Care Act, which Congressman Ryan and Governor Walker want to repeal, actually has what are called making some effort requirements that say that the state cannot gut its Medicaid programs before we fully implement national health care reform. Otherwise, since Medicaid expansion is part of the plan, they'd be dumping that onto the federal government. So there are two things that are happening here. First, the Walker administration is asking for waivers, so that they have the authority to throw people off of Badger Care, for example. Those waivers hopefully will not be granted by the Obama administration. We know Sessions will take care of that, so hopefully they will not be granted.
Clearly the Obama administration doesn't listen to me.
Oh, there you go. But in that case, they could change eligibility, change co-pays, change deductibles, reduce the coverage, et cetera, et cetera. Now let's say they don't grant that. Here are the kind of things they can do. They could, right now, childless adults, and there was a cap on how many could sign up. That was an expansion under Governor Doyle in his last couple of years. And parents of children can be covered up to 200% of the poverty level, okay? He could unilaterally reduce it to the federal minimum, which is 133% of the poverty level. So in that way, by middle of 2012, he could have a lot of people not eligible for Badger Care. Now, what does that mean? Well, I mean, those percentages, you don't know what that number means, right? For a single person working at the minimum wage full-time, they would not be eligible for Badger Care if that's over 133% of poverty. That's how low that is. For a family with 2 parents and 2 children working at minimum wage only, they would be over 133% of poverty. So a lot of very low income, moderate income working people who can obviously not afford to pay for private insurance, and by the way, if they had any medical conditions, even if they could pay for it, forget it, right? They would be on their own. And so they would lose that security they have now. By the way, Tommy Thompson, of all people, created this because he thought you needed health care in order to remain healthy and keep a job, so people wouldn't have to be on welfare. So he actually, despite us having disagreements with him on welfare reform, actually believed you needed child care support, you needed health care support. We've moved way back, so this is a bridge, not to the 1980s, but to the 19th century in doing this. And so that is what is likely to happen in this budget, but it won't be in the budget. It'll be done by Secretary Dennis Smith on behalf of Scott Walker later. And so that's what we face in this budget, and that's why we need to, well, we'll get what we need to do. By the way, I'll let the other speakers, but this is only necessary if you come in deciding that not only do the wealthy and the corporations not have to pay their fair share, because public employees have made their ante already, right? Not only do they have to pay their fair share, they deserve more tax giveaways, because there are $200 billion more in tax giveaways in this budget. So these aren't necessary choices. Scott Walker wants to say we have the worst fiscal crisis ever. It's not as bad as what Jim Doyle first faced when he came to office. By the way, I'll leave you with this. The national average, by the way, the fiscal crisis is caused by Wall Street, right? And malfeasance there that brought revenue down. National average for state deficits, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, is 20% of the state spending in a year. Wisconsin's is 12%. So our budget crisis is serious, but it's well below the national average. The only reason you need to do the things he's trying to do is because you want to do them, not because the fiscal crisis made him do it. So, and education's even worse, as you'll hear.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi guys, I'm Jennifer Mandel. I am a parent of 3 boys from Milwaukee Public Schools. And I basically started working with some parents about a year ago when we were looking at cuts in our schools and the concerns that parents had in terms of every year it seems like we're cutting more and more staff from our school. We're cutting Phy-Ed, we're cutting art, we're cutting music, we're cutting language, the people who are bilingual staff, and really necessary services to keep kids in school. And some of us parents got together and started working on issues to help improve school funding. And at the time, before Walker came into office, we were trying to speculate. We were working with Tom Beebe from Wisconsin Alliance for Excellent Schools, and he has this program right now, or this petition out right now called A Penny for Kids, which is a short-term fix to help ensure that if we added a penny tax to things, that we could have more funding for schools. It's a short-term fix. He has a long-term fix. But when we started discussing this, the idea was that we were looking at about a $200 increase per pupil in MPS, or actually across the state, sorry. Across the state, every year, students get about $200 more per head into the public school system. So when public schools receive the children, they get a certain amount, and every year they got about $200 to adjust to the cost of education going up. 200 was never enough, which is why we had to keep slashing. So when we started doing this, we were counting on maybe about a $200 increase every year. We want to supersede that 200. What happened was when Walker came into office, he not only said you're not going to get that 200, but we're going to take away about $550 per pupil. So it really feels about a $750 cut per pupil across the state of Wisconsin in all public schools. It's not just MPS, it's the entire state of Wisconsin. As you probably know, we've had about an $834 million cut to public education in Wisconsin. Over 2 years, this equals about $1.7 billion. Things that are cut in terms of what I can say as a parent in MPS, we've lost programs such as Phy-Ed. A lot of schools don't have Phy-Ed, they don't have the art, they don't have the music. Working across other school districts outside of Milwaukee Public Schools, working with the suburbs, I feel like they're starting to feel this impact because they're starting to say we're going to lose our PE, our art, and our music. And while that's not a good thing for them, it's, MPS has suffered this for a lot of years. We have schools with half-time principals. We just don't have the money in place to have these services, and other school districts are starting to feel this pinch too. So parents across the state are coming together. I'm working with I Love My Public Schools to help work to organize parents to speak out and to get better funding for our kids' education. Some of the services that have cut, like I said, the specialties, we have our SAGE programs, which you probably have heard about in the news. SAGE helps ensure that we have small classrooms, or a small amount of students per teacher. I think it's 1 per 15. We're getting rid of that as a result of the Walker budget. We've got a lot of other hits coming to the classroom. We have bilingual staff that are there to help ensure that kids that don't speak English can be taught English as they learn. We're going to be losing a lot of those staff. So it's going to be a hard hit to Milwaukee Public Schools and all students across the state. I know I don't know a lot about rural education, but I'm certain that the rural areas of Wisconsin have their own unique ways that they're going to be hurt by the Walker budget for education. Some of the things that I just find a little contradictory, there's a few, but Governor Walker is proposing, I just read about today, he met today to do his Read to Lead program. He's got this idea that he's going to help third graders, do something with third graders in reading. And while he's doing this for this third grade, I know Tony Evers, who is the state superintendent for all public schools, for the public instruction in Wisconsin, he has concerns about this as well. There's a lot of programs in place that educators have met with DPI and all these other people to make sure that reading is done the right way. Right now, Scott Walker is meeting with other people, never minding the fact of what we have in place. He's kind of reinventing the wheel and doing something else. Tony Evers clearly has concerns about this. I find it a little ironic because as a parent on my child's school governance board, I've been told that possibly our reading specialists are going to be cut and our math specialists. We have data to show that math has improved in our district as a result of the math teacher leader. We have spent, I assume, millions of dollars, tons of time working cooperatively with the Department of Public Instruction to ensure we have a solid reading program in place. But if these specialists are cut, I don't know how this is going to impact my child's education. I don't think you can train a teacher for 1 year and then pull out and say they've got this whole plan down. Professional development is required, but if the funding's not there, I don't understand the purpose in Scott Walker's Read to Lead program. The other thing I wanted to discuss was the topic of parental choice and the 2R charter schools. I'll start with the parental choice. As most people know, the parental choice program, also called the voucher program, was started, I think, 20 some years ago. In Milwaukee, we started where some people, I know Howard Fuller was a leader, started it to ensure that children in poverty could use a voucher to go to private schools within the city of Milwaukee. And this has been going on for years. We've had no data to show if this has worked or not. This is the first year data has come out. I would argue that it's showing that the students in the schools are performing worse than Milwaukee Public Schools. You can slice the data no matter which way you want, but there's no evidence to show that it's working better, that's for sure. Problem with the voucher schools is that there's a few problems. There's one, I have a deep concern of how it's segregating our city. We have a lot of kids in the Milwaukee Public Schools with a lot of needs. There's physical needs, mental health needs, emotional needs, and these kids cannot, although the voucher schools can't deny them, the voucher schools also can't service them. So if they have any regard for human rights, they're not going to take a student that they can't educate. So we have some kids in Milwaukee that they will attempt to go to these schools and get sent back because the school can't service them. Or the school will say, you don't come to school enough. You got to go back to Milwaukee Public Schools. You're dropped from our enrollment. So what this voucher program is doing is it's taking basically some of our stronger families within Milwaukee Public Schools, the families that are there for their kids and have the ability to step up and help advocate for them and advocate for their education and help to be there as an active parent in the education. They're going out to these voucher schools and they're able to keep their kids there, but the kids who are really the neediest, the kids with severe emotional needs, severe physical needs, any child with disabilities, these kids are not going to be serviced in voucher schools, so it puts all the kids back into MPS, leaving us with a lot higher population of needy kids. I think the recent data was MPS has about 20 to 30% special ed. The voucher school has about 1.9%. There's a big difference, and the further we expand this voucher program, which is what Governor Walker wants to do, the more segregated Milwaukee Public Schools is going to be. This is not good for my kids, and it's not good for them, for the kids who are turned away from the voucher schools. The other thing I was going to address is the funding flaw as a result of the voucher schools. Last year alone, due to the funding flaw, Milwaukee Public Schools lost $50 million. That was in 1 year. There's a funding flaw. Mayor Barrett has spoken about it. There's a lot of people who have spoken about it. Nobody really wants to discuss this. Last week I was in Madison discussing my concerns about AB 92, which is about voucher expansion. And the response that I got from the chairman was that, yes, there is a funding flaw. Some will say there is, but at the end of the day, my constituents aren't going to care. Like, they don't care because they trust that Milwaukee Public School will not spend the money the right way. And I guess I didn't understand this, because if I give my child a $5 allowance and they want to blow it on candy, that's okay. Like, I don't see how you can say, give the money over to MPS and just say, well, we don't trust it. And frankly, I do trust that Milwaukee Public Schools will use the money the right way. As a parent who sits in the school governance board, we're not blowing any money. We're reaching for money. So the response we got was that that's too bad. We just don't trust that you're going to spend it the right way. So we're not going to fix this. So year after year, $50 million last year could help pay for the summer school my kids probably won't get this summer. It would help pay for the specialists that we're talking about, the SAGE programs, the math and reading, and all these other services in place. So it's, I guess I'm really trying to help push as much as the voucher program is in place. I don't like it at all, but if we can at least fix the funding flaw, I would be a little bit more okay with what's going on, still working to end the voucher system in general. The other piece too that Governor Walker is moving ahead with is SB 22, which is the 2R charter schools. He wants to impact the number of charter schools in the state, and what this does is it creates a 9-person authorizing board, which is, so the board would govern these 2R charter schools, and the board would be appointed, 3 of the people would be appointed by the governor, and 3 of them would be appointed, and 3 by the Speaker of the Assembly. So this limits the legislative oversight and allows Walker cronies who have no experience in education to make influential decisions about schools. SB 22 permits one organization or company to open multiple schools. Right now they're limited to one. And this is the one that I just find ironic because it modifies teacher licensure requirements so that charters don't need certification. So anybody with a bachelor's degree can go in and teach. So on one hand he's working on this read to read program, and he's saying today in the paper, teachers need training. But then on the flip side, he's going to open charter schools and say, who needs a certification in training? I mean, I value teachers. I trust they have a skill that I don't have, and I think it's important that anybody that's using public money to teach students needs to be certified in education. The last point about the 2-hour charter schools is that when budgets are slashed for public schools, the operating costs remain the same. Schools must look to other places for the money, and they often look to corporations. Corporations are responsible to their shareholders, not to kids and families, which is a huge conflict of interest, which challenges the goals of education to prepare the citizens for democracy. The last point I was going to bring up before I pass the mic is the Governor Walker's attempt to to allow the residency requirement to be lifted for teachers or for all staff in MPS. I live in the city. I have no intention of moving. I would not argue that just because you live outside the city that you can do a better job with Milwaukee's youth. I think teachers in Milwaukee get our student population. Last time I heard, we're looking at layoffs. We're not looking at a big recruitment of teachers, so I don't know why we need to start opening up this requirement and make sure that we get in teachers from all of the other areas. We have a good pack of teachers, we just need to be supported. So lifting the residency requirement could hurt the city as well, because you're going to lose, you could, depending on the teachers and where we go in the years of education, you could have teachers picking up and moving, and you'd lose the middle class to the city. That's about it.
I have a constituent who had this dream. He told me, and a plan, but his dream was that southeastern Wisconsin would be the Silicon Valley for renewable energy because of what we have. His name is John Bobowich. He's a constituent of mine, and he says, you know, just look at southeastern Wisconsin. He gets all enthusiastic. We've got, you know, this incredible manufacturing work base. We have the technical colleges, and we'll work with the universities to create these new forms of renewable energy, wind and water and solar and biodiesel, biofuels, and all this great stuff. And but instead we had Scott Walker. So all this wonderful enthusiasm, he still has it, and this organization called WORK, Wisconsin Energy Research Consortium, is still out there, but they're working under quite a bit of a bushel right now. So what has Scott Walker done for jobs? Because, you know, that's what he ran on, jobs. And I know he's taking credit for some of the jobs that were created and fostered in the previous administration, but our dear governor is taking credit for that. And we also know that people are losing jobs because teachers are being laid off and other public employees are being laid off. But he still thinks he's the jobs man. What has gone on since he has taken office, and just to take a little trip down memory lane, he started out with his special session jobs bills, which really have not created jobs, and it cost $142 million before the whole budget process got started. This included the tort reform, the health deductions for health savings accounts, tax deductions for health savings accounts, that's $50 million. And then a few more $100 million on job creations, which would incentivize businesses who hired new people and expanded by giving them $93 or up to a little over $300, because nothing like $93 to say, wow, I'm just going to go hire a few people. But that's what he did. He also had the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation that was part of his special session jobs bills. And we know that there's been a theme since he's taken office and the Republicans have taken control of cronyisms for important positions. And in the budget adjustment bill, he had a provision in there to let go up to 37 civil servants with a lot of experience and education and replace them with cronies, I think he called them. political appointees or something, but cronies. And the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is a public-private mix that is supposed to spur job creation, but there are a lot of concerns that this has very little oversight, very little accountability, and a lot of important programs that were housed under the Department of Commerce, which is being dismantled to create this Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, were programs that really looked at how do we get more women in the workforce, how do we get more minorities in the workforce, how do we get people who desperately need jobs back to work. And all of those programs are at risk right now. We also knew through that special session jobs package of his that the environment wasn't a terribly important part of his agenda, because that's where the wetlands development came in the Green Bay area in Brown County. So that was before the whole budget stuff got started. We also know that he sent back over $800 million that would have helped with our trains, because that wasn't an important thing, and now gas is over $4 a gallon, so his foresightedness leaves much to be desired. And wind energy, one of those clean renewable jobs programs that could have really taken hold in our state and in southeastern Wisconsin, was put under serious harm because the wind sighting rules that we put in place in the last session, which would be uniform wind sighting of 1,250 feet, under pressure from realtors and realty lobbyists, put pressure on Scott Walker, and he moved it to 1,800 feet, which is pretty restrictive. And Invenergy, a renewable wind energy wind turbine company from Illinois, decided, you know, we're pulling out. And that was $1.8 billion of investments that were pulled out of our state because of this. So again, we're looking at jobs. Okay, then the budget adjustment bill comes, and it is not called a budget repair bill, it is budget adjustment. And the Nonpartisan Fiscal Bureau, in all of its memos to us, calls it the budget adjustment bill, because it is not fixing anything. As we know, it's not fixing anything, it's causing a lot of problems, and so it is adjusting things a little bit. In that, Robert already talked about this huge harm to the whole Medicaid system and the power given to another crony, Dennis Smith. The no bid contract to sell the power plants. I mentioned the crony appointments, and then of course we know about collective bargaining. And in all of those were losses to the state, because there is, the federal government has $47 million in grants that they give for public transit, but the employees of the public transit have to have collective bargaining. So we lost more money because that was taken out. And we also know that when people have less spending power, because they're putting more money into other areas, their contributions to the pension and to health insurance, and the assault on public employees, that we've seen a lot of people quit their jobs, and they will have less spending power. There's less spending power, there's less spending in local communities. People aren't going to be going out to dinner as much, they're not going to be getting their hair cut as much, they're not going to be shopping as much. So we're going to see probably more layoffs and not less. Then we have the budget itself, which favors large corporations, it does not favor families. And what it does to the environment, we're already finding. Now this is hundreds of pages of the analysis of the budget, and we're still combing through, I'm going through it, it's been combed through a few times, and we're getting briefed on it. But what it does to the environment, we know it raised the transportation fund, and that's already been mentioned. And this is from the governor, who says he will not rate funds. Has rated the transportation fund and taken the money that would support public transit and put it in a general purpose revenue. So it's competing with schools and with healthcare and with education, all the way from early childhood education up to higher education. It's competing with everything. Mental health services. So the robust health of the public transit system is in deep, it's seriously harmed, and he is not a big fan of public transit, as we know. And again, gas is over $4 a gallon, so we have a problem with that. And if you want to create jobs, you need to find ways to get people from their homes to their jobs, to their places of employment. And not everyone across the state has a car that they can drive around to their jobs. They're looking for a job so they can purchase a car perhaps and advance their style of living, but he's taking that away. Recycling aid has been cut, and that has been a huge impact on local communities. And there's other things there with the farmland preservation, conservation, that would take farmland and preserve it so it doesn't get all bought up by realtors. And there have been farmers who have been counting on this program, so they could sell some of their farmland and preserve it for future generations, to maybe downsize a little bit and work with other farmers so they can expand the growing power that they have. That's been cut. Phosphorus regulations and other water regulations have been diminished in the budget. We put a bill in the last session that said there has to be limitations on phosphorus runoff. And in the governor's budget, this isn't a fiscal item, he just doesn't like the environment and clean water apparently, says that the rules which control this phosphorus runoff can be no more restrictive than any of the surrounding states. So we don't want to be a leader in clean water, we want to be a follower, like, hey, what's Illinois doing over there? How dirty is their water? Okay, well, we can be that dirty too. Again, I don't know how that's good for jobs or the environment, but we have that. He jeopardizes the stewardship fund. A lot of things in there that just got away at things that make our state great and that we're proud of. But I do want to talk about, real briefly, because Session said, things you can tell your neighbors. I've been talking to local communities, to village managers, and what I hear across the board from village managers who tell me they're Republicans and from village managers that I know are Democrats, are they're really, really upset on what this government, what this budget does to their local communities. It's cutting shared revenue. And so in a community like River Hills, which I represent, it doesn't impact them very much because they get very little shared revenue, they don't need a lot of shared revenue. For communities that are more poverty and more needs, it's a huge cut to them. It's also cutting the recycling funds that they have relied on. Now, if communities want to continue recycling because it's important to the environment, they either have to do it on their own, pile it up, if they don't have a car, pile up all the recyclables and wait for the bus and then take it to a recycling center somewhere and try to dispose of it. Or people are going to have to pay for those recycling services through fees. Fees are not tax deductible. Fees are regressive. If the fee is $100 more per 3 months, that's $100 more per 3 months for the very poorest people in the community and for the very richest people in the community. So people will be paying more, or they will have less services. There's also incredible resentment from local communities at the state level because Scott Walker and Republicans are telling all these local communities and locally elected officials that they don't know what's best for their communities. Scott Walker knows what's best for their communities. You might think that you moved to Cudahy because you really liked what Cudahy had to offer and you chose Cudahy over South Milwaukee because you liked Cudahy services more than you liked South Milwaukee. Doesn't matter. Scott Walker knows what's best for Cudahy, Scott Walker knows what's best for Whitefish Bay, Scott Walker knows what's best for Sherwood. And any of the unique things that different communities had that they really valued and their elected officials value for them doesn't matter anymore because the state government is telling them how much they can raise, how to spend it, and if it means less police services, less police services. Less recycling pickups for them. And it also means that their local streets are going to be in much more difficult condition, much worse condition, because Scott Walker's putting money, as we know, into transportation, roads, in the highways that we may not be using so much because gas is over $4 a gallon. But our local trips to the grocery store on our local community roads are not going to be repaired because there's no money for it. So I really think some people are like, yeah, I really like that cut in taxes. That's really good for me. And they say, but you're going to be spending it on increased fees. You still want your recycling done? You still want your garbage picked up? You're going to be paying for it. And that's part of the message that they're just not saying. Or yeah, you want your taxes cut? By the way, when you call 911, you're going to have a longer wait. By the way, when, and how long of a wait is good for you? I talked to one of the police chiefs in my local community and said, we're okay, we probably will have to lay off one police officer, and I think we'll be okay as long as there's only one accident or robbery per shift. And if there isn't, you're gonna have to wait a few hours. So, I mean, those are some other things that are in this budget. It's going to have a direct impact on a lot of our day-to-day lives.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. The streak that runs through all of this, you know, and whatever it might be about messages, that obviously the rich get richer and working families have to fight harder and harder for what they need to get ahead. The services that we value, the quality of life that we value is under attack. So wealth continue to be transferred up the chain. And it's not us who's going to decide that, right? It's somebody else, whether it's an emergency financial manager or it's a board of cronies appointed by the governor or whoever it might be. Obviously, this meeting is starting to get a little, okay, we got a lot to do. Let's take a couple of questions for the panel and make sure that we have any other discussion that we need to have, and then we'll go forward with the rest of the meeting. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you. My name is Sybil Rockwell. My question is for you, and I spent 34 and a half years as a special ed teacher and have degrees up the wazoo. But my question is, most people do not know that special education laws are civil rights laws. They are not education laws. And that a very strong case should be made as you take your special ed kid to the Carter School and said, under federal civil rights law, you must serve my child. Do it. And people don't know that. You need to know that. Now, both of my grandchildren go to Milwaukee Public School. I'm very involved in the school. And my grandson did well in the stage class. My granddaughter's the kind who would do well in a class of 40, with a nun with a ruler with a silver thing where they hit people. But the fact that they're getting rid of the stage class, and the fact that they think they can teach reading starting in the 3rd grade, are you out of your gourd? Okay. You better start it in K4, or they aren't going to make it.
Thank you so much. Some responses? To the panel.
Okay, sure. I agree that I think, you know, special ed rights do need to be followed wherever the public money is going. I know last week when I was up in Madison, there was one of the representatives was asking pretty specifically if the voucher schools can turn away students with special ed, and they said no, we can't. But they didn't say what they do. And as somebody that works in MPS, I've seen the downfall. The kids come back. There's no doubt they come back. And so she said we can't turn away. But you know, I know quite clearly if you have a child who's, you know, maybe on feeding tubes and trachs and needs nursing services, I don't think you can ask these schools to do because they don't have the resources. But that would argue that you shouldn't be putting any public money there in the first place. The other thing that they were implying between the representatives speaking and the pro-voucher people, then they're pretty clearly implying that MPS diagnoses special ed for money. They made it pretty clear that, well, so the voucher schools don't have any incentive to give special ed, but the incentive to MPS is we get more money. So I don't know if this was like a sarcastic note or something that they really believe, but you know, I can tell you that the only incentive for diagnosing someone with special ed rights is that you're educating the student appropriately. That's the only incentive. There's no financial incentive.
One quick side comment on that. MPS used to, I taught high school occasionally, so I can fill the room. MPS will not diagnose children, or not write a diagnosis. You're going to get me if I'm wrong, aren't you, Jerry?
Yeah, I can fill in some details.
Okay, good. Is that MPS can't afford to give a child a special ed diagnosis, even if we all know it is, because it costs too much money to educate it, and therefore they don't want the child labeled until he's at least in 1st or 2nd grade, because they can't afford it.
Yeah, hi, I'm Terry Falk. I'm on the school board. I'm also the chair of the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee. Regarding the special ed, we are having lawyers looking at this right now as possible lawsuit issue, violation of federal laws under a child disabilities. We don't know where that's going to go with that. The two other areas I'd like to raise is, number one is one of the problems we're having in all other school districts across the state, as well as the communities. We have to set our budget sometime early June. We have, unless the state budget passes fairly soon, we have no idea what we're going to be operating under. We had gone in the past where budgets went fairly late, but the issue was they were just tweaking the previous budgets. This is so radical, there's no way to plan for a budget for next year. Lastly, what the government is doing is so radical in so many areas. There is one area in which he is going to guarantee full employment, and that's for lawyers. Okay? This is a full Lawyer Employment Act. Okay? I'll give you one area, for example, that's going on. The governor is asking that all departments submit to him all their rules and regulations for him to sift through and make changes if he needs to. He's also asked the Department of Public Instruction, or told them that she'll do that. The reality is that's unconstitutional. Tony Evers has already said that it's unconstitutional. Tommy Thompson tried to do it when Benson was the state superintendent, lost in the Supreme Court 9-0. There are going to be so many areas that are going to be brought forward if the budget passes anywhere close that is going to go through litigation, that this may paralyze the state in many ways.
Actually, we're talking about special session bill, Senate Bill 8, and that did not pass through the Assembly yet. It was scheduled and then pulled off, and we don't know if it's been pulled off because they don't have the votes, or they just like to keep us in special session and jerk us around a little bit. But it gives the governor unparalleled power, and it's very frightening to me that I would look across the aisle at my Republican colleagues and say, why are you giving away your authority and your responsibility and your power to someone else who may not be in the same, who won't be in the same party in the next election? And they just follow just in line with whatever he's been wanting. So that one hasn't passed. They may be looking at the whole legality of it, or again, maybe some of them are waking up and saying, this is a really stupid thing to do, and maybe we should back off on it. But that it has not been, did not pass out of the Assembly yet.
Did either of the other panelists want to comment on that, Robert?
Oh, I'll just quip that it's the Lawyer Employment Administration if it comes to overreaches for power and complete concentration of authority in one hand. If you're injured by a large corporation or a nursing home, then you can't. Then your lawyer has no power.
Right.
Or if you're an auto accident, for example. So if you talk about freedom, right, they believe, the other side says that it's government that takes away freedom if you have any kind of government guarantee of access to health care, equal access to education. In fact, he is setting up a situation where corporations have unfettered power over people and where he's concentrating governmental power on their behalf. And so that wouldn't be my definition of freedom.
Other questions for the panel? Comments? Tracy?
Hi, my question relates to the school choice, and my understanding on the change of the income level or removal of that. If you would please explain
He
that.
removes the income level. So
Completely. So I could make
completely.
$150,000, move to Milwaukee.
You could make
pay for my son to
$150
go to
million.
school?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He removes the income level.
I just wanted to make sure I was really clear on that.
Yes, and there may be some pushback on that because it'll have a huge fiscal note to it. And I was at the joint finance hearing, I don't know how many of you were there, but there was someone who was testifying in support of it who ran a private, choice school, and said that this is really needed because they really take too much time going through the paperwork to determine eligibility. So this is just, it makes their paperwork so much easier by just getting rid of the income.
Let me just say quickly, so he cuts the earning of tax credit for the working poor, he cuts the homestead credit for the working poor for seniors, and he gives public money to wealthy people, like the president of M&I Bank, to send their children to university school. That is, and by the way, a number of voucher supporters, former voucher supporters, are against this, including Polly Williams, including Howard Fuller, and so this is, we're finally seeing the full right-wing agenda for vouchers, which all along was not none of my public schools, but to literally shift money to wealthier people to support private schools. So that is one of the most compelling tidbits and anecdotes you can use to talk about the moral character of this budget.
two more little tidbits on that. The W-2 program, which has been in effect since 1997, giving poor women $673 a month, no matter what size their family, has never seen a cost of living adjustment. Has been around since 1997, no cost of living adjustments. The Walker administration does the equivalent of a 3% tax hike. He's cutting that, their cash payments by $20 a month. So now they will get $653 a month. So we're going to have, again, more taking from the poor and giving to the rich. And the other thing that they're starting to do is call public schools government-run schools, because it has more of a socialist bent.
As opposed to corporate-run schools, right?
I was just going to add on about, yes, I mean, what she was saying is right. They are looking to remove the income. I know tomorrow there's going to be an executive session specifically just to discuss the AB 92, which is a voucher expansion, which means doesn't have anything to do with the income, but it's going to be where we can expand the voucher schools throughout the entire Milwaukee County. So city dollars allocated to my children that is not reimbursed through the funding flaw are going to private schools now anywhere in the county. It could be Whitefish Bay, Wauwatosa, any of these private schools. So that piece is there, and I know the income cap is a piece that he's talked about. One piece that I've always wondered is, you know, there's tons of people in the city of Milwaukee who currently pay tuition, cops, firefighters, whoever, they currently pay tuition. So I don't see how that's going to save money by some families shelling out maybe $10,000 a year to the private schools, now saying that the city is going to now, you keep your $10,000 and we'll pay it. I don't understand where the savings in that is. So just one more reason.
We have one more question. I'm going to have Jack Murtaugh get the last question in here, because, you know, then we don't have to call the government police or the government fire to.
We are gradually, like, through your help, we are becoming aware of all the pieces. As it was mentioned earlier, previous budgets were tweeted. Who actually prepared this budget? Who actually was behind and prepared it?
Well, I think we all believe it's Alec. You know, it certainly comes with an agenda and a plan that really guts the very essence of what is Wisconsin and what we value. So I can't believe this is a homegrown, homebred, home thought out kind of budget with Wisconsin values, right? It's coming from without and it's hurting us from within.
I'm glad all the education on the Koch brothers is great. That was an immediate audience response. But I would want to say that, like, there are all sorts of open records requests out there to try to find out. One we filed is that there's a provision that disallows the Department of Revenue from investigating or disallowing a corporation from using subsidiaries and joint reporting for tax avoidance. And it's retroactive 2 years. So our open records request is, what corporations are under investigation by the Department of Revenue for such tax avoidance? So we'll see if they answer, but there are a whole lot of other open records requests out there. Try to get to the bottom of Jack's question about who wrote this, and a lot of the lobbyists for people who benefit from this budget helped work with Alec and the Koch brothers in writing this quite clearly.
All right. Jennifer, any last words?
As a parent in Milwaukee Public Schools and advocate for all public education across the state of Wisconsin, I would just say, you know, keep informed on the school issues. All kids across Wisconsin are going to be hurt by his budget. Kids in Milwaukee specifically have extra burdens due to the voucher system, the funding flaw, and all these other pieces he wants to put into place. Look into Tom Beebe's A Penny for Kids. He's got a great idea. Tony Evers has a different funding formula that could be applied. Look into some of these options and help support this in terms of, you know, even if you don't have kids in school, we know that they are our future. We do need to educate them, and it's a quality education. It can't be all about just the final dollar and how much money we can save. We have to provide a quality education for our kids, which comes with good policy.
Any final words, Sandy or Robert?
Talk about this to your friends and neighbors who may not be clear as to how this is really affecting them, because it will. We all live in a community which is going to see less funding And as a result, there will be less resources, and the things that we just take for granted, we can't take for granted anymore. Basic services of police and fire, the condition of our roads, the quality of our education, the air we breathe, the water we drink, all of that is in great danger if we don't start addressing these. I don't know who the winner, well, I do know who are the winners, but it's not going to be the people, the middle class families, the families struggling to get by, the people with disabilities, seniors. Those are not the winners in this budget.
I think we're at a real turning point in this right-wing onslaught, which has been building force for a number of years, and if this needs to be the high water mark, but that only happens if we make that so. No one who's a progressive believes that the government is supposed to give people anything. What they're supposed to do is create the conditions for freedom, where people have opportunity, where people have security, and those conditions are being undermined. In Wisconsin, we have made investments for generations in a first-class education system, in a first-class health system, and for one budget where the crisis is, it's a crisis, but it's not that bad, it's smaller than other states, it's smaller than other governors face, he's using that as a cover, as a pretext to undermine those generations of investments and set us back, because they have a vision for a society that doesn't include that kind of freedom, that says if you have a place where there's concentration of income and corporate power is unfettered, that equals freedom. That's the right-wing formula. That's not real freedom. That's not the Wisconsin way or the American way, and we need to fight this back.
Thank you so much. It's a lot to take in. We as Democrats, obviously, $500 million cut to Medicaid, $1 billion cut to public education and the UW system, $350 million cuts to transit. We are fighting a tremendous battle. But it's not just about those statistics, right? It's about the impact on our families, not just kind of families, but our families, right? I have 3 children in public schools. You all have folks who are in nursing homes or in assisted living or taking advantage of programs like family care. You guys drive on these roads. You enjoy these parks. And so if we don't solve these problems, we're not going to have the Wisconsin that we want. So we thank you very much for highlighting those issues.
One last little bit here. There is special election going on May 3rd, a week from tomorrow. And they are for 3 open assembly seats that were open because Scott Walker picked these people and appointed them to his cabinet. We have a good chance of getting one of them back. And that's the seat held in La Crosse, or it's in the La Crosse area, held by Mike Hipsch, who is now Scott Walker's right-hand man. We need to get that seat back. So if you can go online and give some money to Steve Doyle, just $10, $20, he doesn't need a lot. The outside money, Koch brothers, is using their influence, and they're sending out incredible anti-Doyle campaigns that are full of lies and distortion. So we have to fight back. We have a good chance of getting that seat back. So
thank you, Sandy. Great, thanks, guys. Okay. Quickly.
Is it for us to write or call or email the people in Madison?
Just ask a question again, somebody can hear you.
I just asked, how much of a help is it? And I'm talking actually to Sandy because she knows. How much of a help is it for us to write, email, or call the people in Madison?
you need, honestly, I don't spend a lot of time paying attention to letters and emails and calls I get from outside of my district. So know who your representative and your senators are and contact them a lot. Write letters to the editor and do work from within. So if you have a representative who's a Republican, that's really, really important. And get all your friends to contact them. We Dems also like to hear from our constituents that we're doing the right thing and they're supporting what we're doing. But just sending it off to everyone, don't bother with that. Be selective in who you send it to. It's also good to get that the information to members of Joint Finance. And there's a special website you can go to send your comments to the Joint Finance Committee. So send them to Joint Finance, send them to your own rep, to your own senator. And then I would do letters to the editor and just start educating people as to what's in this, Even your Republican neighbor who thinks, this is awesome, this is a wonderful budget. We're not kicking the can down the road. We are kicking the can down the road, by the way. There are kick the can down the road provisions in this budget. We are raising funds. But again, as Session said, direct effect on people's day-to-day lives in this budget.
Martha?
Yeah, it's just a fast one. I think I can talk loud enough. I was wondering, Sandy, you know, you said to educate, and so did you, Jennifer, Jennifer and Robert, is to educate other people. My question is, do you have a set of talking points?
I'll get you.
The thing is the more we get out for educating
Sure.
about the budget, the better off we are. Because I mean, you know, most of us know some, but, you know, you all are the experts.
Well, let me just say one thing, you know, we can't talk about every hour, kind of go through just the, you know, third of the budget that we could tonight. But there's lots of resources out there. The most important thing I would say is to tell your own story. How does this budget negatively impact you? And why is it going to, if your representative or your senator votes for it, how is it going to make you say that's not the right direction, right? And if everybody in every one of these districts across Wisconsin just talked about in their own self-interest how this budget is bad for them, it's going to force the politicians to kind of respond to that and say, well, we don't want to piss all these people off, right? Or at least to motivate folks to vote against the ones who are pushing forward the Walker agenda. Each of these guys have websites. Obviously, you can go to Sandy's website on wisconsin.gov, and I'm sure she'll have a campaign site that continues to get updated. I Love My Public School is a site. Pennyforkids.org is a site. Citizen Action is a site where there's lots of data. And there's tons of links from our Twitter account, our Facebook account, from the Democratic Party, and from our webpage. So if you pay attention to all those pages, we can make sure to put those links up again tonight to each of these organizations and each of these folks who are talking about these issues.
It will affect all of you if you ever need law enforcement or a fire truck to come to your house. It will affect you and your neighbors.
Great. Thanks so much, panelists. We appreciate it. One more round of applause. We're going to do our best. Now, we've only got about 10 minutes left. We want to try to get this meeting done by 9 o'clock. I'm going to give a